My name is Jessica. I've always enjoyed working with my hands, and recently I've become obsessed with making hair accessories for women. At 38, I find myself surrounded by hair ornaments I'd never wear, so I've started selling them on an online marketplace. It's a fun activity that combines hobby and practicality. Now, let me tell you about something that happened to me about 10 years ago. I got married to my husband Ian, who was the same age when I was 26. I think the first 2 years of marriage were peaceful. But after those 2 years, well, to be blunt, my mother-in-law Susan started becoming a handful. From the time we got engaged, "I'm looking forward to seeing my grandkids," she would say. Susan, who lost her husband early, was a bit sad about Ian's marriage, but she seemed to overcome her loneliness by looking forward to grandchildren. At the wedding, "One day your children will leave the nest just like this. You better prepare yourself for the same feelings." She even said, "Once you settle down, make sure you get busy." She made rather blunt comments. I understood her feelings, and even if it was a bit uncomfortable, "I think you're a bit too eager," I would say, laughing it off. But recently, Susan's behavior has become clearly different. The first sign of this change came in the form of a phone call. Of course, the call was from Susan, but it was unusual for her to call. Even though it's the in-laws' house, we're still separate families. We've maintained a comfortable distance since getting married, only interacting during twice-yearly visits for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and occasionally when there's a specific need. "Jessica, do you know about coral?" "Huh? Oh, coral from the sea. Yes, I know what that is." I was wary of mishearing or misunderstanding her outlandish question. Even if she was asking if I knew about the samba, I would wonder what she wanted. "Coral is said to be a stone that blesses you with babies. They were just talking about it on teleshopping. Maybe you should buy some." Well, as a housewife, I hardly wear any jewelry except for my wedding ring. First of all, I'm not wealthy enough to buy coral from teleshopping. I don't want it because it's neither my hobby nor interest. What's gotten into her all of a sudden? "Oh, really? What a shame. They were just saying on teleshopping it helps with conceiving a baby." I hadn't really taken her seriously until that moment. "Wait, are you suggesting coral because you want a grandchild, Susan?" And it suddenly dawned on me. If she's serious, it's quite a roundabout way to go about fertility. After that, Susan went on and on about the idea of having a baby and her experiences as a mother, and it took about an hour before she finally ended the call. To think she'd go this far just because she wants a grandchild. Maybe I should look for a doll that looks like a grandchild on some online store instead. While idly browsing online shops with such silly thoughts, I was feeling a bit weary about the possibility of more such conversations in the future. A week later, this time, Susan paid a direct visit to our house. Upon finding out Ian was off from work, "Just perfect," she exclaimed. "Look at this. Names like Emma and Oliver seem to be popular right now." She showed me the cover of a baby names book, sending chills down my spine. "Wait, we haven't even conceived yet. Are we naming an imaginary baby?" I almost blurted out. "I saw online hazelnuts. Isn't that cute? It goes well with our last name, too." It seems Susan has been thinking too hard about names for an imaginary baby, considering outdated ones and trying to incorporate modern ones, focusing on uncommon names. If she's this excited about an imaginary baby, I can't imagine the name she'll come up with for a real one. I felt a shiver run down my spine once more. Worrying about the future of this uncommonly named imaginary baby. "Right, starting today, you need to drink this, Jessica." She handed me a box with writing in a language I couldn't identify. It looked dubious. "It's tea I bought online. It's said to be good for pregnancy, mixed with 40 types of herbal medicine." So that's it. Even through the box, there's this indescribable smell of something sour and bitter. I haven't tasted it, but if I did, I'd probably lose my sense of taste in exchange for pregnancy. I look at Ian for help, but he doesn't catch my plea and just says, "Good luck, Jessica." Good luck? Am I a parthenogenic human? Am I not an amoeba? I want to say we should both be trying, but I kept silent. Nothing's going to change by speaking up now. Then Susan pulled out from her large bag a stork-patterned jacket, a ladybug necklace, a Japanese-style t-shirt with a vine drawing, and a peacock-colored skirt. The shoes were bright red low heels. If I wore all of it, lo and behold, I'd be dressed head to toe in motifs said to aid in conception, a completed fashion styling of hopeful fertility. But it's lost all sense of style. If I walked outside in this outfit, I'd surely be stopped by the police. No one would come near me. To top it off, she left behind an incredibly creepy mask. "People who carried this had babies," she said. Apparently, a fortune teller at a local festival recommended it, but the design looks more likely to make children cry than bring comfort and assurance. She's definitely been duped. After Susan left, needless to say, I was dumbfounded as I gazed at all the bizarre souvenirs she brought. Half a month since that incident, I caught a terrible cold for the first time in years. I'm not usually one to get sick. Perhaps all the recent stress wore me down. While coughing for some reason, I looked at the mask that Ian had hung up. It's unsettling, naturally. It feels like it's staring right at me, as if it's sucking everything in. Just then, like the tolling of the bell of doom, the doorbell rang. At such an odd time on a weekday, I hadn't ordered any delivery. We don't have many acquaintances nearby, so the list of people who might visit is short. Feeling a chill, perhaps due to the fever or the eeriness, I looked at the door monitor to see Susan standing there. The end. Those words flashed in my mind. "Jessica, oh dear, have you caught a cold?" "Yes." Sniffling, I reluctantly opened the door to greet Susan. "That's perfect then. Let's go to church right now. We need to pray for a baby." "Huh?" I croaked out in a hoarse voice, unintentionally sounding gruffer than intended, but Susan paid it no mind. "When you're weak, you feel God's push more. He will grant you infinite baby-making power." She started to sound like a character out of a movie. "I have granted you the power to shape the fate of the world. Now go forth to the future," she might as well have said. All I want is to head towards my bed. First of all, what is this infinite baby-making power? Am I planning to have that many babies? I'm not feeling well, and I don't want to pass it on to you, Susan, so maybe today's not good. I tried to choose my words carefully, hinting her to leave. But Susan wasn't fazed at all. "I don't mind catching a cold. If it means I get a grandchild, it's worth this life." Apparently, Susan is willing to risk worsening her cold or even her life for a grandchild. Wow, are you serious? That means she won't even get to meet the grandchild. Is that okay? No, once it's decided, let's go. Susan had a taxi waiting and dragged me, still in my pajamas, into it forcibly. Praying in pajamas seems like an insult to God. If I were him, I'd strip you of all your power. Sadly, since my body wasn't cooperating, I was taken to a church in the dead of winter, completely at Susan's mercy. After returning home as expected, my fever worsened. Just when Ian got back, I explained the situation, and I said, "I've lost my appetite. You'll have to make your own meal." "What? I'm tired from work, and now this?" "I'm tired too, thanks to your mom." I was truly exhausted, unable to couch my words in any niceties. I just let out my raw, unfiltered thoughts. "Well, I guess there's no helping it." "What do you mean, no helping it?" Adding to my poor health, Various frustrations were bubbling up, but I just wanted to sleep and couldn't say anything more. Even talking was difficult with all the coughing. Who could deal with that? Eventually, even after the fever subsided, my cough lingered, leading to a diagnosis of borderline pneumonia. It must have been because of that visit to the church. Harboring resentment, I focused on treatment to get rid of the misery as soon as possible. Thanks to that, about a month after catching the cold, I was nearly back to my healthy self, though still with a bit of coughing. My strength wasn't fully back, but I was finally able to live normally again. Or so I thought, until Susan showed up at our house again. Damn it. Ian thoughtlessly let her in. How can he just casually open the door to anyone? What about our security? I felt like crying. And right as Susan entered the living room, she looked at me and said, "So, how's it going? Did my cute grandchild happen?" Sure, in your eyes, I'm just like a paramecium, a miraculous being capable of single-handedly ensuring the continuation of a lineage. No matter if I have pneumonia or whatever, just popping out babies left and right. Went to church and prayed after all. But come on, that's ridiculous. I appreciate your concern, but I've been under the weather and certainly don't have the physical capacity for such strenuous activities. Besides, it hasn't been long since then. Biologically speaking, it's a bit challenging, you know. Oh my, that tone! I've always thought, Jessica, aren't you a little too lukewarm about having babies? You need to be more enthusiastic. Well, if you're frequently visited like this, anyone's enthusiasm would wane. But I didn't say that out loud. I've been waiting for a grandchild forever. At this rate, I'll die waiting. Could you be infertile? If so, divorce him immediately. I'll find a new wife for Ian who can produce hazelnuts. Hazelnuts? Really? But this might work out for me. All right, shall we get divorced then? What? Ian was shocked. Oh, good, you're quick. I've prepared divorce papers just in case. Come on, sign them quickly. Okay. Wait, Jessica, Mom. Me agreeing to divorce so readily, Susan encouraging it, and Ian panicking. A bizarre scene indeed. In rare accord, Susan and I asked Ian, "Any complaints?" Ian fell silent. Finally, a divorce. Honestly, I was fed up with Ian not taking my side, and since the cold incident, I've been thinking about divorce. So I had no hesitation. 3 years later, walking down the street. Ah! I heard a shout. What's all this noise? I thought, and looked towards the source to see Susan and Ian standing there. Jessica, what's this all about? I was momentarily confused, but then followed Susan's pointing finger and realized. I'm pregnant. Yes, after announcing my divorce that year, Eddie, a former coworker, heard about it and asked me out for dinner. I met up with him thinking it would be a nice distraction. I've always liked you, but since we were at the same workplace, I never said anything. Then you got married, he confessed. I had become quite averse to romance, so I was hesitant at first, but gradually, I should think positively about this, I began to think, and we started dating. From there, I've been sure about you for a long time. Please marry me, he said, and just like that, we were quickly married. To my own surprise, it was a whirlwind wedding, followed by a whirlwind pregnancy. Incidentally, I was walking with Eddie's mom, my new mother-in-law, Frances, that day. Jessica, who are these people? She asked. My ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law, I replied. Frances nodded significantly with an, "Oh, I see," look at the two of them. What's going on? Wasn't Jessica infertile? Susan blurted out, bewildered. Next to her, Ian was pale as well. Well, who knows? Maybe it was thanks to all those things I received back then that I got pregnant. In a more suitable and destined family. Is this the power to conceive a baby? I said with a smirk. That can't be right. Nothing worked at that time. Were you doing something to prevent having babies? Were you deceiving us? No, that's not it. But now, as you can see, I'm pregnant and very happy. Perhaps back then, the stress was too much for pregnancy. What's that supposed to mean? That we were causing stress? It's not just that. There are other possibilities, right? Like what Susan mentioned earlier. Wait, what? I didn't answer, but smiled and looked at Ian. His face was even paler now. No, it had turned white. What does this mean, Ian? Susan demanded. It's not me. I'm not infertile. It was all Jessica's fault. You know, I actually went to get checked to see if I was infertile. I never told you the results. Ian sounded dumbfounded. Right now, he looks like he might collapse if I merely nudged him. Such a fool. You haven't been tested, have you? And here I am, pregnant with my new husband. As I said that and smiled, Susan exclaimed and slumped to the ground. Oh no! It's unfortunate, Susan. Maybe a grandchild is a bit out of reach now. Your lifespan might catch up to you first. How about it? Why don't you look for a new son instead? I threw her own words right back at her in reverse. You were the infertile one. Susan fumed. Ian kept repeating. No, it's not me. I'm not infertile, he said. Ian, remember when you had mumps before we got married? Did you know that when adult men get mumps, it can cause other diseases and lead to infertility? After that, you had periods of, well, I won't say where, but you had times you felt unwell. You should have gotten properly checked for infertility, instead of just a cursory examination at any random clinic. After Ian's dumbfounded reaction. It was you all along. Give me back my grandchild. Give me back hazelnuts. Susan yelled. But you know, hazelnuts doesn't exist. Over 3 years, the imaginary baby seemed to have grown significantly in Susan's mind. A spectacular fallout ensued, Susan loudly cursing her son with words I can't repeat here, and Ian, as if looking down at his own lower half. Could it really be me? Infertile? He murmured. Watching this tragic scene unfold, I felt again. Leaving this house was the right decision. You can fight amongst yourselves. I'm going back to my warm and lovely home with Frances. Oh, by the way, Frances is going to pick the baby's name. Isn't that nice? As I said that, Susan wailed. It was supposed to be my grandchild, and cried loudly. Embarrassing, so I ignored her and left. Sometime later, Ian contacted me out of the blue. Can we get back together, even with the baby? He asked. At this point, it's the height of foolishness. Eventually, after being dragged to the hospital by Susan, Ian was diagnosed as infertile. Well, I had suspected as much. Shocked by the news. Marry a woman with children, preferably with small kids, Susan told Ian. Her comment was akin to kidnapping. Officer, that one right there. Please arrest her. But for Ian, the idea of any woman with children, aside from me, whom he originally did not want to divorce, any other woman was out of the question. That must be why he contacted me, but of course I wouldn't entertain the thought. Despairing over her infertile son who couldn't remarry, Susan disowned Ian. Ian, too, accepted it, blaming all his misfortunes on Susan, saying he was done with such parents. But in that house, they were the only family each other had. It was less disowning and more of a mutual estrangement. From what I gathered reading Ian's messages, both Susan and Ian are lonely and want to return to how things were, but neither feels they can come back triumphantly until a baby earns them a daughter-in-law. I always thought that day would never come, and sure enough, 10 years later, Ian still seems to be single according to social media, so it appears their goal truly hasn't been met. Moreover, possibly due to stress, His hair seems to be thinning day by day. Or perhaps it's more accurate to say his weak hairs are getting sparser. I think he'd be better off going bald, but perhaps the idea of having neither hair nor children is too much to bear, as Ian seems desperate to hold on to his remaining strands. Susan, having estranged herself from Ian, seems to be leading a lonely life in her later years with no one to rely on, having broken her health. They should just reconcile instead of being stubborn. Meanwhile, I've had 3 children with Eddie. The first child we named Francis, the second after Eddie's father, and the third Eddie and I named together. We chose very sweet names for our 3 daughters. Everyone had a similar sense of naming, so thankfully we avoided the tragedy of uncommon names like my ex-mother-in-law. It was hard initially having children close in age, but Francis and Eddie's father helped with childcare, and even Eddie, busy with work, managed most of the household chores, so I wasn't stressed. Eddie earned significantly more than Ian did, allowing us to live in a high-rise condominium, across the room from the in-laws' house. So it's been an ideal environment for focusing on raising children. Maybe that's why we've been blessed with many babies. To put it cheekily, we're living quite comfortably now. Just kidding. The girls, though tomboys and sometimes fighting with local boys, are really adorable. I started making hair ornaments because of these kids. Tomorrow, I'm taking Francis and the others to the amusement park. I'll be preparing a special homemade lunch to take with us.